Hello and welcome. I'm Lynnanne Pearson, Informational Librarian at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library, and thank you for joining us for Bookish Novels. This panel celebrates novels centered on libraries, bookstores, and the enduring magic of storytelling itself. I'm pleased to welcome Meg Anderson, The Memory of Borrowed Books from Sourcebooks Landmark. In this debut novel, a librarian discovers a secret room of magical books containing the unfinished memories of past patrons when her beloved library is threatened with closure. I'm also happy to welcome Kate Eberle, If Books Can Kill, from Penguin Books, Penguin Random House, a debut comedy thriller romance mashup about a romance reader who wishes to live inside her favorite romance author's new book, only to find herself in a crime thriller. Rhonda McKnight, writer in residence, Thomas Nelson, HarperCollins Christian. To overcome some writer's block, a writer must confront the ghosts of her past and the fears of her present in this heartwarming tale of second chances, love, heritage, and determination. Ande, Pliego, The Library After Dark, from Bantam, Penguin Random House. A bookseller must escape the infamously haunted library that holds her darkest secrets. But with a murderer in her tour group, escaping alive is not as simple as it seems in this twisty locker room mystery. And finally, Freya Sampson, Most Ardently Yours, from Sourcebook, Landmark Sourcebooks. And it is truth universally acknowledged that a single woman in possession of many romance novels must be in want of a book boyfriend. A hopeful romance novelist summons Mr. Darcy to the 21st century and must contend with the ultimate book boyfriend. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Let's get started with our question. My first question is for everybody, and Meg, you'll be the first one to answer it. The title of our panel today is Bookish Novels, and all your books are centered in libraries, bookstores, and/or feature an author. Tell us about your bookish novel and what inspired you to write a bookish novel.
Yeah, so The Memory of Borrowed Books is about a librarian named Claire who is fighting to save her library from being destroyed. And as she is fighting to save it, she discovers this hidden room. And in this hidden room are magical books. And in these magical books are memories from people who have passed through the doors of the library. And as she's going through these memories, it then forces her to confront one of her own that she's buried long ago. There's one book in particular that continues to pull her in, and it connects her to this mysterious artist named Julian, who she later realizes is far more intertwined in her own story than she ever could have imagined. So with time running out, she has to figure out what it is that the library is trying to tell her before the building and everything that it holds is gone forever. And I would say what inspired me to write this story would be my own love for libraries. I was the girl in high school who skipped the cafeteria to eat her lunch in the school library. And I learned early on that books and the places that hold them can feel like home. And I really just wanted to write a story that really captured that as a whole.
Thank you. As a librarian, I love hearing that. Kate, tell us about your book.
Yeah, If Books Could Kill is the story of Roxy Mitchell, who is a huge romance novel fan and makes a wish to live inside the plot of her favorite author's next book, but discovers, even though it has come true, that there's a little bit of a snag, which is that she ends up having this incredible meet cute and romantic first date with like the book boyfriend of her dreams. And then he tries to kill her. And that's how she discovers that it's not a romance novel, it's actually a crime novel. So, yeah, it really came to me from just I think that like universal reader experience of finishing a book that you love and being really sad and wishing you could just like climb inside it and live there. It was a very specific moment. I had finished reading a book that I just absolutely loved, and I had the thought like I just wish this author could just write my life. And kind of had the light bulb moment of like, ooh, wait a second, what if that happened? And how could it go horribly wrong? And yeah, I guess, I was thinking about romance novels. So I guess my brain was kind of like, all right, well, what's the opposite of romance? Murder, probably. So that's kind of how it all came to be.
Wonderful. I feel like sometimes my life is like a horror novel, but that's a different story. Rhonda, tell us about your book.
Hey, so Writer in Residence is the story of a woman named Alex Chambers. She's a writer who's struggling with writer's block. She takes a position with a is a tutor for local children at a literacy center in an industrial island in the South Carolina Low Country. Just sort of lucks into this position, and while there, she discovers it's an opportunity. Oh, thunderstorm, sorry. I can't control that. She she finds her voice again. She builds a relationship with these children, a local gullah cleaning woman who works on the property where she lives as a writer in residence. And of course, there's a Southern food and a yummy hero. It's a book that sort of continues my brand of writing grandma love, comfort food and sweet tea, and romance in the Low Country. So yeah, I'm really excited about this third book in that sort of, not really a series, but my third book in the Low Country.
Thank you. I definitely got very hungry reading your book, let me tell you. Andy, tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, thank you. So The Library After Dark follows a bookseller in New York City. Her name's Aria, and it's Valentine's Day. Her new boyfriend is taking her on a literary infused date around the city, and she is, I mean, they're ready to have a great time, and he surprises her with an after dark tour group to a supposedly haunted library. This would originally be something that she would really love if her darkest secrets that she's tried to leave behind weren't inside the library. And the last time that she left it, she left a dead body inside. So it's kind of like the Valentine's Day date that goes terribly wrong. So they go through this library. There ends up being more people on the tour group than they expected, and there's just one problem. The doors lock and they get sealed inside, and then they have to make their way through the very themed rooms trying to find a way to escape while they start dropping dead. So it's was a lot of fun to work on. It really came out of just my love for books and just bookish people, and I really wanted to capture the feeling of when you're adult and you're thinking about that first time that you read a book or a fairy tale or something like that, and it just kind of like reached through the pages and caught you by the throat and was like, it just, you fell in love. Caught you by the throat versus falling in love with with story. And so there's so many references to all sorts of literary books, classics, children's books, all sorts of, pretty much everything that I could fit in that I just love about libraries and about bookish history. So yeah.
Thank you. And Freya, tell us about your book.
Hi everybody. These books all sound amazing. Actually, I want to read them all. What a great selection. So I am talking about Most Ardently Yours, which is it's actually my third bookish novel. This is my happy place because my debut novel was The Last Chance Library, which was about a library. And then I read a sort of murder mystery called The Busybody Book Club. And then there's this one. So it's lovely to be here to talk about this great sort of topic. So Most Ardently Yours is about a young woman who has, after a rather sort of disastrous relationship, basically given up on love in real life. And instead, she contents herself with reading her favourite romance novels and falling in love with the book boyfriends within their pages. And of all of those, Mr. Darcy is her absolute favourite. And one day she walks into a sort of dusty old bookshop in London where she gets into an argument with the male bookseller, who refuses to sell romance novels in his shop. She's outraged by this, obviously. And so when she sees an old copy of Pride and Prejudice on the top shelf, she grabs it and kind of rescues the book and runs away. Only it's not an ordinary copy of Pride and Prejudice. And the next day, Jane Austen's Mr. Darcy arrives in London. So she finally gets to meet the book boyfriend of her dreams, and he is everything she hoped he would be. But obviously Darcy has to adjust to living in contemporary London. And as he does, Zoe begins to realise that actually maybe it's not so great that he is here. And Nick, the bookseller, is very keen that she gets him back to the pages of Pride and Prejudice. And so begins their adventure.
It is quite the adventure. So for Meg, I had a question specifically for you. Your book is The Memory of Borrowed Books. And your main character, Claire, is a librarian, and she discovers a secret room of magical books containing the unfinished memories of past patrons. If you had a book in a hidden room, what would the title be, and what memory would be in that book?
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's kind of impossible not to write a novel that centers around magical books that hold memory and not constantly have that question within your own mind of if I had a book with a memory in it, what memory would that be? So I actually have thought about this question a lot while writing this story. And I really was surprised actually with the memory that I would leave within a book. I originally thought it would be a really happy memory, but I actually think the memory that I would want to save would be the day that I was diagnosed with MS. It was a really, 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 really hard day. And it marked the beginning of a really dark period in my life with lots of unknowns and a lot of what ifs. And for a long time, I wanted nothing more than to hide that memory away. But it was while I was writing Julian's character in the memory of borrowed books that I really began to learn that it is possible to set down a lot of that heavy load within your life. It doesn't always mean that the pain is going to go away, but it will become more manageable with time. And so, even though even now there are still a lot of unknowns and what ifs within my own journey, I think that that would be a memory that I would want to save. If anything, just to be able to go back and see where I was, where I am today, and where I hope to continue to go. And so, with that, I think I would name it. The title would be Keep Going.
Thank you for that. My mom had MS, so I think that's so lovely, the title of your book.
Well, I'm sending hugs to your mom.
Kate, question for you. Your book is If Books Could Kill. So your book is a mashup of mystery, thriller, romance, and comedy genre. You play with and you upend some genre conventions, including your male lead Grant often ends up as the damsel in distress, which I particularly loved. So how did you go about combining all those genres and their subsequent tropes and conventions together?
Yeah, to be honest, I think that if I had started it setting out with that in mind, that like, okay, I'm gonna mash all these genres together, I think that would have felt really, really daunting. So one thing that really helped me was just the fact that I really came to it from a romance rom-com lover's perspective. That's really like been my lifelong love. And then the darker, like mystery, thriller, crime stuff ended up being kind of more just incidental to this particular story idea and wasn't something that I was so well versed in. So I kind of led with the rom-com side of things and then found where I could pull in other elements. But a really cool thing that I think I learned along the way is that there are a lot of tropes and conventions of each genre that work really well together. So, for example, like, doing like a crime situation, stakeout is a really great forced proximity situation for the characters. And, having them go incognito lends itself perfectly with like a fake dating setup. So that was really fun, kind of seeing how I could almost get like a 2-for-1 deal on those like tropes and things like that. And then other than that, I think that I really just felt like when in doubt, the humor of it all felt like the glue that held a lot together. Obviously, there are comedic elements in like every genre, or able to be. And so I think that was something that was able to kind of find the common ground and strike a balance between some of the, darker elements of some of those genres and then the more lighthearted and, um, niceness of the romance.
You. I definitely laughed out loud several times during your book. It is a very funny book.
Thank you.
Rhonda, your book is Writer in Residence, and your main character, Alex, you already talked about, is suffering from writer's block. So, what is behind her writer's block, and how did she kind of try to work through that block? And have you ever experienced anything similar?
I think I'm going to kind of answer this from the last question first. I wanted to write a bookish book. I've read a few and they're fun, and I had been fortunate enough to spend some time at the Pat Conroy Center in Beaufort, here in Beaufort, South Carolina. I've done some events there, been a part of a book lovers convention. Um, and there is a writer in residence position there. And I always thought, wow, that's such a cool opportunity. I would love to be a writer in residence. So I decided to create a story about a role that I thought I would like to sit in. So that's how it sort of began. And, that novel also gave me a chance to sort of share some of the behind the scenes stuff that happens in publishing, which I think many readers liked, to learn some of those little tidbits. Alex was an interesting character for me to write about, I think mostly because I got to see the worst possible scenario for what the worst possible scenario for a writer would look like. With respect to her being blocked, she discovers she had lost her love for writing um, in the genre that she was in, but there was a fear there of doing something different, even something different, even within the same genre, like Kate just said. There's a lot of crossover. We have opportunities to sort of do really different things. And she was afraid to do that. And I've experienced that myself, that feeling of sort of being pigeonholed because that's what's selling and it's like what's paying the bills, particularly if you're a full-time writer. And even though I took this step forward, I wrote the different thing. I thought it would be interesting to write what happens when you don't let the story out that wants to be told. And so maybe you become blocked like Alex. And so that was sort of kind of the inspiration for the story. And, one of the things that I think the readers will enjoy discovering as they read the story. And I enjoyed writing about it. So, yeah.
Saw many of your fellow writers shaking their heads around all your words you were talking about of letting the story that needs to come out be told. Andy, your book was The Library After Dark. And you talked about that special tour. So how did you plan out this very intricate mystery and keep all the pieces of the house organized during your writing?
I used the Lucy Foley method, which she explained to me and made me feel better because mine is very similar. Lots of laying on the ground and crying. No, not exactly quite that bad. But yeah, so it's my books always have a lot of moving pieces, and it's very tricky to figure out. And so for the most part, I'll be working through a plot. I'll try to keep it really simple as best as I can in the first draft, and it just always becomes more complicated as like more layers emerge the more I go on. And so I've done several different methods where I'll do like I call it kind of my wheel of suspects, and like the main thing I try to do is make sure that each character that I want to be a suspect has a potential motive and opportunity to have killed the victim. And that's kind of my guiding light throughout the book is like, I know what they're kind of, I know what red herrings I'm going to be sprinkling through and trying to switch off, like who I'm focusing on or who I want the reader to focus on throughout it. And so it's very I wish I had a great method and I don't, but it's it's kind of miraculous that it comes together in the end, and I'm just grateful for that.
Thank you. As long as it works for you, that's all that matters. Freya, your book is most ardently yours. So what do you think makes Fitzwilliam Darcy the perfect book boyfriend? Why does this character stand the test of time? And overall, what do you think makes for a memorable character?
So I mean, when I was thinking about this book, I did run through lots of options of who this who this book boyfriend would be. And in the end, it had to come down to Darcy. And maybe not everyone agrees that he is wonderful book boyfriend. He has his flaws, but I think that's part of why actually he's a really attractive book boyfriend is because, yes, he's, handsome and eligible and £10,000 a year and the package, but he is also a really flawed character, and he falls in love with a woman because she is flawed too. It's the flaws he falls in love with. So, it's not her beauty that wins Darcy to Elizabeth. It's the fact that she's funny and smart and sassy. And I think that is very modern. I think even though this book was written so long ago, readers really respond to that. And also, I think what's also amazingly modern about him as a book boyfriend is that his capacity for change is huge. He goes on this massive journey across the book, which really is led by him, not by external forces. He is the one that changes for Elizabeth, overcomes his pride. And I think that's just, for me, when I read a book, aside from all the, physical things we love in our book boyfriends, I think someone who does change, who goes on a journey for the woman he loves, for me is, I think, the ultimate catnip for a book boyfriend. So yeah, I think I personally have a big soft spot for him. And also, I've got to say, also Colin Firth. I was 15 when I watched the BBC adaptation, very impressionable age. So perhaps that's part of the reason I will always love Mr. Darcy so much.
I think there are many of us who saw that adaptation at an early age and have loved Colin Firth and Mr. Darcy since as well. So I agree with you. Meg, sadly, your main character, Claire, is facing something that sadly a lot of librarians are facing: budget cuts and a hostile boards. What words of wisdom or advice would you give to librarians facing similar budget cuts, and what steps does your character take in this situation?
Yeah, another big reason why I wrote this novel really was because I feel like it's impossible not to be able to hear the growing conversations around budget cuts and book bans and libraries and just this current situation within this world that we're in and not feel frustrated and angry. And I definitely did, and I still do. And I channeled a lot of that into my own writing, which then really just it a lot of that shows up in memory of borrowed books. And I I wrote this book for librarians and libraries first and foremost. I really do think that librarians are the backbones of the communities that they serve and the places that they fight to protect every single day. And I really do think that libraries, they don't just hold books, they really do hold people within their walls. And I think that when you have a job such as that, it is just as important and vital, and it matters. In the novel, Claire, when she finds out that her library is going to be destroyed, she feels very anxious. She feels very overwhelmed and she feels alone. But as we follow her in the novel, we really see her begin to use her voice and most importantly, lean into her community. And it's through that she learns that she's not only that she's not alone, but she also learns that the library, it means so much to the community, and through the memories and through the stories, it really helps to begin to show her how much the library really is worth fighting for and how much it really does mean to everybody. So for librarians today, I think what I would say would be first and foremost, never, ever, ever underestimate the power of your voice. I know sometimes it can feel like you're screaming into the void and no one is listening or hearing you, but don't ever underestimate the power of your voice and your community. I think that as librarians, you ultimately you serve your community, but I think that you would also be surprised to learn how much your community wants to be there for you as well. And I think that if you use your voice in your community and even stories, I think stories are so powerful. If you use those three things, I think that you'd be surprised to be able to see how much that might um, really, inspire people to want to move and to act. Yeah.
Thank you for that impassioned defense of libraries and for writing about it and bringing a larger audience to some of the issues libraries and librarians are facing today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Kate, a question for you. Your main character, Roxy, describes her parents as two of the least compatible people I've ever met. How does Roxy's perception of her parents' marriage influence her own views of romance and relationships?
Yeah, well, Roxy definitely has this internal struggle where, like her mom, she really is a romantic at heart and has a real soft spot for love stories. But she has this kind of formative example of a relationship that she obviously grew up with has not been a healthy one, and has kind of served as a cautionary tale for her. And so I think it sounds like pretty similarly to Freya's protagonist. She really kind of decides that the best way to go about it is to compartmentalize and be like, okay, I can get my romance fix from fiction and just like really indulge in that in a way that won't break my heart and ruin my life, and stays in a book where it belongs. And then in her own life, she's determined to not get attached and just kind of live freely and do her thing and without the risk of heartbreak. But I think that it's really something as she goes along, part of her journey is kind of recognizing that maybe that there's a lot of it's a very fear-based way of going about romance and relationships, and it's ultimately not really serving her. And so I think that's really one of the things that she comes to terms with, and that Grant in particular kind of holds up a mirror to her, is learning that, relationships in real life are messy and they're risky, and you don't necessarily know how they're going to turn out, but that it's worth it to let yourself, love and be loved, even if it's not going to last, even if it is going to end up, hurting your feelings or whatever, something can still be good, even if it's not forever.
Thank you. Sometimes we just need a happy for now. Rhonda, uh, one of Alex's sheroes is Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. For those who haven't heard of this extraordinary woman, can you tell us about her and why she is an important figure in American literature and history?
Certainly. I Harper was one of the earliest widely published Black women writers in the United States, which in and of itself makes her significant. I admit at the onset, I wanted readers to see her name, and I wanted them to just sort of learn about who she was. There's so much to this question, so I'll try to keep it brief. I read one of Frances Harper's speeches in college when I was in freshman college composition 42 years ago. And that speech was, "We are all bound up together." It was, she delivered it in May of 1886 at the 11th National Women's Right Convention. And in that speech, her message was that no movement for justice, especially women's rights, can succeed if it ignores the struggles of Black women and other marginalized groups. Um, that society itself is interconnected, meaning that injustice for one group affects all groups, right? And so she basically talked about intersectionality before there was actually a term. So as a Black woman and a feminist at age 18, I was moved by those words and I never forgot them. Um, so For me, I felt like she was a natural fit to be a hero for a character like Alex, for any woman, certainly a Black woman. And then one of her quotes, "A room to myself is a luxury I do not always enjoy." Um, she she wrote that quote in one of her essays in, I believe it was 1875. And I know that, often when we think about a similar quote by Virginia Woolf, I think it sort of sends the message that women have always, been trying to find space to create, space to tell our stories and get our words down. I can say for my personal self, I am at a stage in my life where I'm doing some caregiving. and I reside in the home with my parents. But just this week, I had a shed delivered in the backyard that is going to be Rhonda's writing shed, because I've been looking for, although I have an office in the house, sort of that space to create and write on my own. And I think a lot of that has been inspired by Frances, who had to write in the dark, in hotel rooms and in places, just finding a desk somewhere where it was very difficult. I love that I, 140 years later, am able to, was able to buy this shed and able to create and write stories, and it's not in the dark and secret. And so, yeah, I could go on about her, so I'm going to stop there, but she just felt like she's been a hero of mine. And certainly I put that on Alex. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I learned this is my first time hearing about her, so I was really grateful to do some more of my own research after reading about her in your book too. And thank you for talking about her. Andy, your book, some characters. So the heart of it is a book called The Tales from the Dark Hearth, and it's a supposed curse book that causes and there are deaths associated with this book. So while some of your characters are in your haunted library, they experience possible paranormal activities. So do you yourself believe in ghosts, the paranormal, or curses, and what scares you?
It's been really funny because I've been talking to a lot of people about this with this book, because I'm not quite sure what I believe actually. So um, I am a Christian, so I believe in things we can't see. But as far as, and I've seen enough weird things like, I was in a castle in Scotland that some of the staff said was haunted, and our shower would turn on at 2 a.m. and there was no one in the shower. So like I've seen, I mean, that could just be a plumbing issue. I feel like, you can always play it two different ways. And but there's been some other things that I've kind of seen. I live in an old Victorian house from 1880, and there's been some strange things, and so I am not sure. And I don't know if I will land one way or another, or if it'll kind of be a perpetual, maybe an experience will change it. I don't know. We'll kind of find out. And then as far as what scares me, honestly, there's um plenty more things in real life that scare me. I'm pretty hard to scare with like fiction, or just kind of like the normal things. But one weird quirk of mine that I don't understand, I don't know where this came from, but if I get up in the middle of the night, I refuse to look in mirrors because I am terrified that I'll see someone behind me, and that just scares the tar out of me. So I won't even look. I'm like, I don't want to know if someone's there.
Well, thank you for adding a new phobia to my list of phobias now. Freya, so you talked a little bit about Nick. So tell us a little bit more about Nick and how is he like Darcy or unlike him?
Can I just start off by saying, Rhonda, as someone who's my writing space looks nice on Zoom, but it's like a corner of my kitchen with my kids' dirty dishes about a foot that way. I'm so happy for your writing shed. I want one of those for my own, please. It sounds amazing. So Nick is uh, he is on the surface quite different to Darcy. I mean, well, he's handsome and he's stubborn, and he's a bit grumpy, which I suppose is similar to Darcy. But he would hate that comparison. He is someone who is particularly against, and in fact has a particular dislike of Darcy, of the character, Jane Austen's character. He would try and put as much distance between the two of them as possible. But when I was writing him, I was obviously Pride and Prejudice are huge themes in Jane Austen's novel, and I wanted them to be themes in mine as well. And I'm always interested with Darcy as a character, how, a big part of his journey is when he realizes that his pride has got in the way of plot spoiler if anyone here hasn't read Pride and Prejudice, but of when Wickham and Georgiana elope, Darcy says, it's my foolish pride got in the way. If I had just not worried so much about my honor, I could have stopped something like this happening, which I always love as a sort of realization for a character. And so when I was thinking about Nick, again, I don't want to plot spoiler my own book, but I was sort of inspired by that idea of someone who, like Darcy, holds a secret, a family secret that has shaped their whole life, and who will go to any effort to try and protect that, even when it causes problems for the people around him. So he is much more like Mr. Darcy than he would care to admit.
Thank you. You are talking to a bunch of librarians. I sincerely doubt not any of them have not read Pride and Prejudice. I'm pretty sure everyone in the audience has, but I could be wrong. Speaking to our audience, please do know that you can put your own questions for the authors in the Q&A section if you have any for it. So Meg, this is your debut novel, which is very exciting. So tell us about your journey to become a published author.
Um, so it was really hard and it was really scary. But The Memory of Borrowed Books actually is not my first novel. It's my third novel that I wrote. I'm a reader. I love reading. I will always be a reader. And one day I truly woke up and told my husband I had an idea for this book, and he was like, "You should write it." And I was like, "I will." And I did. And somehow I landed an agent, and that first book went out on sub, and it sadly didn't make it, but I kept going. And I wrote a second one, and we took that one out on sub, and it sadly did not make it as well. But then I wrote The Memory of Borrowed Books, and that one went out on sub, and it did become my yes. And I am so, so excited that this is my debut novel. There really is a lot of even just my own story sprinkled within this. And what during my darkest time, I really came to learn the importance of journaling. And I'm just a mom of I have 3 kids. I'm just a mom. I don't have any sort of writing experience, but during that dark time I really turned to journaling. And I really learned how valuable and how powerful our words can be. And through that I really just fell in love with storytelling. And so ultimately, this story and just all the stories I hope to continue to write, I really just want to be able to help people through their hardest chapters. And so if there's anyone out there that is listening, no matter your dream, don't give up. It was so hard, and I wanted to give up so many times, but you never know how close you really are. So I am so glad that I didn't give up, and that I am here today with my debut novel, which still feels totally surreal to say, but I'm very excited.
You. Kate, the same question for you, since this is also your debut novel.
Yeah, I really have written throughout my life, but usually kind of just for myself, whether it's journaling or, I dabbled in fiction a little bit, but didn't really have anything that I like fully was trying to get to novel length. And then it really changed for me when the pandemic struck. I'd been doing musical theater up until that point, and obviously that came to a screeching halt with the pandemic. And I found myself really, really needing a creative outlet to kind of replace that in my life. And so I really just dove in and decided to like really try to write a novel. And I had one that I worked on for quite a long time that I think I came within like maybe a chapter of the end of a first draft. It just never quite felt like me. It was a little bit more of a like historical romance type of thing. And I kept feeling like the characters were joking around in a way that felt too contemporary. And finally, at a certain point, I got the like shiny new idea that became If Books Could Kill. And I tried very hard to resist it for a while. And then I finally was like, okay, I need to work on this. So yeah, and then I started working on that. I think it was like about 2 to 2.5 years that I really just kind of put all my attention into that. And then finally decided to, figure out how to go about publication and started sending it out. And yeah, from there it was a real whirlwind, which I almost felt strangely guilty about because I think I was like very much expecting it to be a long and difficult process. And yeah, I found an agent. We did one round of edits and then pretty quickly thereafter started sending it out and here we are today. So yeah, it's been a lot of slow and then very fast. There's like the hurry up and wait thing that people always say, which I'm finding is very true, but definitely surreal and something that I am just very happy about, needless to say.
You. Now, Rhonda, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your 29th book. So how has your writing changed throughout the years, and what advice would you give to new writers?
So, yeah, I think it's the 29th, 28th or 29th. I'm horrible about keeping track. I don't know that I think that writing has changed very much other than um, it was my first book came out in 2009. Books have to sort of start faster, like, other than that, moving the inciting incident up. I don't think that there have been a lot of big changes. I think publishing has changed a lot. I started traditionally published, and the imprint that I wrote for the first three books dissolved. And then I self-published 22 romance books. But in 2020, I had a story idea that I thought was strong and that I wanted to have wider distribution. So I sought out a traditional book deal. Um, like it was the first time. For some reason, it happened very quickly for me, which has always just been a blessing because I know that how difficult it can be to get published. I think timing was a lot of it. It was during the pandemic. I was able to pitch virtually. And so it was a story about the Low Country. The editor was sort of looking for Southern literature. So I wrote that book and it came out in 2023. I think if I had to say what I think is harder, I think it's harder to be seen as a writer. Marketing and promotion require so much bandwidth. They did in 2009 when my first book came out. I came in when there was an expectation that a writer had to do some of their own promoting. Like you didn't just write a book and send it out into the world. But now it's so much more like, and what's required shifts like with the algorithms on social media. But opportunities like this give us a chance to sort of quiet the noise for the day, and it gives us visibility. And so it's all complicated, but still, I think the desire to create great stories and get them into hands of the readers who want them hasn't changed very much. Advice I have always given to aspiring authors is to, first of all, obviously learn craft, okay? Write the best possible book that you can write, but network with other writers. I think that for me, community has been everything. A lot of times I think I've seen writers sort of do this thing where they want to meet the writer above them, like whoever's at the next level, the bestseller. And they want that person they want them to mentor them or give them a quote or whatever, like just get close to success. And I think that's natural. Many of us want to do that. But I think that building a relationship among your peers, people who are at the same level you're at, is so important because you're in the trenches together. You can help each other. When one of you gets published, those are going to be the people that are going to, celebrate the most. They're going to help promote you. They're going to be the people you whine, mumble, groan, and complain to, in ways that you can't or shouldn't on social media. And so I think that my advice is, just learn the craft, build community, because not only does it give you friends, who are doing sort of the same thing when writing can be very lonely and other people don't understand us. It also, I think that community, you just can learn in community about opportunities for short stories over here or things like that. When you write in isolation, I can't imagine what that's like. I think that I've gotten so much information, just information sharing from my peers. And then again, like I said, there's that networking and support. And so in my opinion, those are the two most important things. Writing a really something high concept is high concept and interesting as you can make it. And then just building those relationships. I would not be here if it wasn't for community.
Thank you. Surprised to say we just have about 4 minutes left. So I don't want to miss out on Andy and Freya to get their next question. Andy, if your characters are locked in the library, so if you were locked in any library or museum, where would you want to be locked into?
The library as a whole or the room in the library?
Whatever. That's a very
Okay.
open question.
Oh man. I would love to be locked in. Oh, I was trying to think about this question earlier, and there's so many answers because I'm like, I'd want to migrate all around. But probably, honestly, fairy tales and folklore, like anywhere like with that section, which like my book has a lot of that woven into it. Because I love studying different cultures through the stories that they tell and seeing the different values and how stories change when they're transmitted orally and across different countries. And then, because now we have written text, but that wasn't always the case. And so there's so many different variations of stories. So I just feel like I could just sit there forever and just read all the different versions. And I would be very happily just leave me locked in the library. I'll be good.
Thank you. And Freya, Darcy is thrust in what he perceives as his future in your book. So if you were thrust in the future, what future do you envision? And if you were thrust in the past, what modern conveniences would you miss the most? And we only have 2 minutes left. So
Okay, I'll speed answer. If I was thrust into the future, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot because of a project I'm working on at the moment that is, anyway, I always feel, it just feels really bleak. I imagine that it'll all be technology. But I would like to think that if I'm thrust into a future, it would be a place where we have rebelled against these things. And actually that the wheel has turned enough that we've come back to, as we keep talking about today, community and like acknowledging the importance of like real life connection, because I can't imagine if we continue the way we're going, let's hope that it's all changed. And I would also love it, but if they could have devised some really clever way of like compartmentalizing time, that means there's enough hours in the day to like be a mother and have a full-time fulfilling writing career. I would like really value that invention, please, like a separation of time. And if I was thrown into the past, what would I miss most? Medicine, paracetamol, drugs, healthcare. It's not a very sexy answer, but like, let's be honest, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for modern medicine. So that is what I celebrate. I would struggle with Darcy's healthcare system.
thank you. We did get what audience question from Jenny, and it's for Meg, and she's wondering, who is your favorite librarian?
What was the favorite librarian?
Yeah, who's your favorite librarian? That is from Jenny, one of our audience members.
Okay, I think I know which Jenny that is. So Jenny, I'm gonna say you are my favorite librarian. She was actually the first librarian I met at PLA. I was at PLA a little bit ago. Yeah, last earlier in April. And yes, thank you, Jenny, for being here. I would say that she's my favorite librarian, but I love all librarians. You all are wonderful. Seriously, all librarians are like my personal superheroes, and I think that you all are fabulous.
Well, thank you all. I agree that you all are superheroes too. We would be great librarians with all the books that you all write. So, and that is our time for today. Lots of wonderful chats. Saying people have much enjoyed our program today. So everyone's looking forward to all your books. So thank you everyone for joining us. And we'll have a short break now. So stretch your legs, grab a snack, and we'll meet back here in 30 minutes. Enjoy your rest, and thank you for attending today.
Thank you.